My name is Rohan Samarajiva. I'll be moderating this session on energizing the bureaucracy. Now, in my book, of course, bureaucracy is not a bad word. Some people think it's a bad word, but I don't. Energizing the bureaucracy is our session, and we are fortunate to have a very senior and experienced official from our neighboring country and neighboring state of Tamil Nadu, Dr. Somanathan, with us to first set the stage. He'll speak for about 20-25 minutes. And after that, I have a wonderful, very strong panel, Secretary to Cabinet, Secretary to Treasury, Secretary to the Ministry of Education, Secretary to the Ministry of Development Strategies and International Trade. Very powerful panel that has been put together. I'm very privileged to be to work on, to participate in this panel. This is going to be an exciting event, even though many people think that government may not be exciting, but I'm trying to make it exciting. And I begin by speaking in Sinhala, because you have to first understand the difference that we work in. I have to get you off center. In government, we have to work in 3 languages. අපි භාෂා 3කින් වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒක සරලම වෙනසක්. ඕගොල්ලන්ගේ ආයතනවල ඕගොල්ලන්ට ඕන විදිහට වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන්. පුද්ගලිකාංශය. අපි භාෂා 3කින් වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ. හැම පේපර් එකම මම මේ මිස්ටර් අබේසිංහට මොකක් හරි ඩොකියුමන්ට් එකක් ඇරියොත් කැබිනට් එකට දාන්න කියලා හැම ඩොකියුමන්ට් එකම අපි භාෂා 3කින් පරිවර්තනය කරලා දාන්න ඕනේ. මට මේ දවස්වල තියෙන ලොකුම අභියෝගය අපේ වෙබ්සයිට් වල වෙබ් අඩවි වල සිංහල දෙමළ ඉංග්‍රීසි තුනම නැති එක. එම නිසා මම තීරණය කරා මේ පැයකමාර අපි භාෂා 2කින්වත් වැඩ කරනවා කියලා. එතකොට ඔයගලන්ට තේරෙනවා මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ සංස්කෘතියයි පුද්ගලිකංශයේ සංස්කෘතියයි වෙනස් කියලා. So we will switch back and forth. I used to be an interpreter in parliament and I learned the art of working in 2 languages. You will say something in this and summarize in the other language, and you keep going, say new things in the other language. Not necessarily 100% translation, right? Particularly, I am mindful of the fact that I cannot follow the official languages policy completely, so I'm going to do summaries in between. That is my job. I'm your official interpreter, right? The other thing is you have in your hand the chamber app. So as our speakers speak, I would invite you to start entering your questions. I will then group them together and post them to the panel. Our idea is basically the 90 minutes will be split 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. About 20 minutes will be taken by Dr. Somanathan. The panel discussion will take another 25 minutes or so, and then you'll have another 30 minutes. So in terms of announcements, we will not be formally introducing. I will simply mention their names. You know, you have a faculty book. මේ එක එක්කෙනාව මම තනි තනියම අඳුන්වා දෙන්නේ නැහැ. කරුණාකරලා ওই faculty book එකේ බලන්න මේ ඒ අයගේ තියෙන විශිෂ්ට සුදුසුකම් ඒකේ සඳහන් කරලා තියෙනවා. Now I would like to invite Dr. Somanathan to set the stage, giving us some international experience. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Abeysinghe, Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Samaratunga, Mr. Hettiarachchi, Mrs. Wijayawardhana, Professor Samarajiva, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very, very pleased to be in this beautiful island. It's my first visit to this country. It's so close to home that you always think you can do it later. I finally did it today. I must say that my first experience with the Sri Lankan government has been very energetic. Didn't need any energizing, in the sense that the electronic visa system that you have here works perfectly. It is the best I have seen anywhere in the world. It took me exactly 1 hour to get a visa. So it was a very nice experience, and my experience with immigration in Colombo was also the best I've had in any country in recent times. So you probably don't need this session, but anyway, Now, Professor Samarajiva has given me some clear marching orders, and even the worst critic of bureaucracies knows that one thing bureaucrats are good at is following instructions. So I intend to stick to the allotted time of 20 to 25 minutes, but like a good bureaucrat, I have 20 to 25. There's a little bit of play there, which I will use. Now, bureaucrats are generally perceived to be well behind the times, and I'm going to strongly confirm that presumption by not using PowerPoint. So, the topic we have before us is energizing the bureaucracy. Now, that contains some kind of implication that something is lacking. As a guest in Sri Lanka, the first thing I wanted to do is to make it very clear to you that this is not a Sri Lanka specific issue. In virtually every genuine multi-party democracy, the civil service is perceived to be indecisive and slow. I haven't found any exceptions so far. The star bureaucracies that are often cited are not in genuine multi-party democracies. Now, why is this? See, the role of a civil service in a constitutional democracy is much more complex than people often appreciate. First, it has a role in preserving the constitutional order in terms of democracy, secularism, elections, free and fair elections. Second, it is expected to be impartial in its dealing with citizens and not show favoritism on the basis of caste, religion, language, region, not show favoritism based on whether you are ruling party or opposition party, not show favoritism based on whether you pay bribes or don't pay bribes. That's what's expected of a civil service, a good civil service. Third, a civil service is expected to faithfully translate the political will of elected governments into implementable policies. And fourth, it's expected to provide sound policy advice, even if it is not the advice the government wants to hear in private. There are fundamental conflicts between some of the actions that are inherent in these roles. So you have to be impartial, but you also have to faithfully implement the will of the elected government. You have to provide sound advice, but at the same time you have to carry forward the government's program, even if you think some parts of the program are not in the best interest of what you think should be done. So the key point is that carrying out a set mandate laid down by management is not the way a civil service works. And so the civil service is sometimes expected, it is part of a civil service servant's role to say no to its own management. And that is not something that is easily appreciated outside the system. And private sector performance appraisal techniques, which are sometimes thought of, I know Mr. Narayana Murthy, the managing director of the Indian IT company Infosys, had at one time suggested that the solution to all the problems of the bureaucracy in India was to copy Infosys performance appraisal system and everything would be fine. I can tell you it won't. He's wrong. And in fact, because if we subjected civil servants to a system that's based on goal setting from the top and with hire and fire, you would soon lose your best civil servants in no time. So energizing the bureaucracy in a democracy cannot be achieved by simply copying best practices from the private sector, however much we may think that that's the solution. And some of those best practices would actually be worst practices if applied in the civil service context. Therefore, the problem of energizing the bureaucracy is a complex one. It needs solutions that need to be crafted to the situation that we face. Now, in the remainder of this talk, I will refer to a few real-life situations that I've dealt with. I will then use them to draw some general conclusions, hopefully of wider application, including in Sri Lanka. I'll ask you to excuse my use of anecdotes, but Professor Samarajiva in his marching orders has said that you would actually prefer anecdotes, so I have made it a little personal. And some of the general conclusions that I draw may not flow from the limited examples that I provide, because the time I have is short. So let me start with one of the most challenging jobs that I held in my 31-year career in the, most of it in the government, was when I was asked to head the Chennai Metro Rail project, which was to create a metro rail system for the city of Chennai. It's a $3 billion project, which was then and is now the biggest single infrastructure project in the state of Tamil Nadu. So there were a number of challenges, financial, technical, land acquisition, resettlement of slum dwellers, procurement. I'll touch here only on a few of them with a view to drawing some broader lessons. When I took charge of this project, the biggest concern that I had and what I saw as the biggest single risk was that we needed to acquire about 200 hectares of land in and around the city of Chennai, which is a very densely populated part of India. I felt this was my single biggest risk, and this was what would actually make or break the project in terms of time and cost overruns. So what we did is, we had a report from our technical consultants, who were mainly railway engineers. We sat down with that report and we decided to look at the land acquisition requirements street by street in 500-meter installments. So we'll put every 500 meters. I sat in personally on it with a team of specialists and non-specialists. What we found was that the plans the consultants had given us were based on technical optimization. So the lines were as straight as possible. The curves had as little curvature as possible, so that the trains could run as fast as possible and at lowest energy consumption. But they had taken land acquisition as an exogenous variable, that somebody would acquire the land, so we'll take the technical route through the city. But this had greatly increased the amount of land that we required for that particular project. So what we did is that we did about 60 minor changes in the alignment. Each of them was probably technically suboptimal, but we actually cut the land acquisition by 60% because we avoided many of the pieces of land that had been required by making a slightly sharper curve or dropping one exit somewhere. So things like that. There were 60 minor changes, but we saved approximately 60% of the total land requirement. We also then went into the issue of which sections were underground and which sections were elevated. Again, we found that the choice had largely been made on the basis of reducing construction costs wherever possible. We decided to change some of that too, because some of the elevated stretches were causing very difficult resettlements in slum areas, and by going underground, we could actually avoid the resettlement completely. And while the cost went up, because underground construction is about twice as costly as elevated construction in a metro, sometimes 3 times as costly, we actually made the project much less risky by avoiding the most controversial stretches in our project. So we overall ended up reducing land acquisition risk dramatically. Costs went up slightly at the time of planning, but in fact, because in India, no land acquisition ever ends with the acquisition. It always goes to court, and 20 years later, the price we pay is much higher than the price we pay initially. In actual terms, we saved money. We also faced a lot of technical challenges. Now, one of the problems we face in government is that we cannot afford to pay we can't pay the highest prices for technical talent. So one of the things we did was that we brought in people who were willing to volunteer, real top-notch technical experts, using one of the commodities that we do have at our disposal, which is prestige. So to give you one example, we had a person who had taken early retirement from the World Bank, who was an expert on transport systems, and his elderly mother was in Chennai, so he was interested in being in Chennai. So I offered him a deal where I gave him the title of Technical Advisor to the Chennai Metro Rail project. We said that whenever he got a World Bank or ADB consultancy, he could go. We wouldn't stop him because I can't afford to compensate for that. And for the rest of the days, we would pay him the highest chief engineer's salary on a daily rated basis, which I'm allowed to do. He was quite happy to do it. He made tremendous contributions to our project. He was just one of several that we brought on board who were not part of the bureaucratic system. And they made very good contributions. Another big challenge we had was procurement. Now, one of the things that I noticed while doing this project, I had done some infrastructure projects earlier too, is that we normally specify requirements for tenders based on the buyer's perspective. That is, we, the government, are the buyer, and we lay down specifications based on the buyer's perspective. Nothing wrong with that. The buyer is the one buying, so we should get what we want. But sometimes we unwittingly insert conditions that are based on rules of thumb or internal bureaucratic norms that can actually unwittingly exclude some suppliers. And it's not even deliberate. So for instance, in the Chennai metro, for very big tunnel tenders, each of the tunnels was 1,200 crore Indian rupees. I believe you do know what a crore is, a koti in this country. We use that in India a lot. So for each of these tenders, we had specified that the contractor needed to show availability of 200 crore rupees of working capital and should have done 5 kilometers of tunneling within the previous 3 years. What we did is, before we actually put out the specifications, we had, I mean, it's quite normal to do this, we had a pre-bid meeting, but in this pre-bid meeting, we actually put out very tentative specifications, and I personally sat in on these were very important tenders for us. And what we heard was that if we put it at 200 crores, there were 2 or 3 suppliers who would just fail, because they were at 180, 190 crore. The 200 was really something that was a round number that we chose because we wanted approximately 1.5 to 2.5 months cash flow. We had put it at 2.5 and we could easily go to 1.5. Similarly, we had said 5 kilometers because each tender was supposed to do 6 kilometers. We could easily make it 4.5. So by making some minor tweaks of this kind, we actually increased the competition for our tender substantially. Many more bidders became eligible, as a result of which we actually got prices in the Chennai underground tender that were lower than previous tenders in Delhi. The Delhi metro was much older than us, but we actually got some rates that were very good, and that was primarily because we got competition. Let me now turn to a very different type of assignment. This was when I was the additional secretary in the Indian Prime Minister's office, which is a staff job. As a staff job, you are there to help your boss do what he expects to get done. But in more concrete terms, the job in the Prime Minister's office is to play a coordinating role in ensuring the effective implementation of government policy. The first issue that I faced, that struck me in the face more than I had ever seen it before, even in my long career, was the tremendous structural fragmentation of the Indian government. So on every single issue, there were so many people that had to be involved. So if you were trying to do tax reform, you have the economic policy view on tax reform in terms of how to encourage investment, how to promote the right behaviors. Then you have the revenue view of tax reform, which is very important, by the way, because government needs to collect revenue. And then you have the balance between these two. And then you have the economists who say that fiscal deficits must be kept low, so revenue needs to be high. Within the revenue perspective, we had a big separation between the direct taxes board and the indirect taxes board, both of them independent secretary level officers. Within the indirect taxes, there was the customs versus the central excise. So tax reform had so many actors, and to get all of these actors to come together and get something done was very difficult. Transport, there's a person in charge of road transport, somebody in charge of rail, and maybe less pertinently, somebody in charge of civil aviation. But road and rail are so closely intertwined that having separate ministries makes it very difficult to integrate. Energy, we had a coal ministry, a power ministry, and then we had a non-conventional power ministry. So you had these three who not necessarily seeing eye to eye all the time. On procurement policy, you had a finance ministry which wanted things to be as cheap as possible. You had a commerce ministry which said, look, the WTO allows you to do domestic preference in government procurement. The US has a Buy America Act. Why don't we have a Buy India Act? So again, you have these conflicts between different sections of the bureaucracy. So in each of these cases, each of the points of view is valid. It is a valid perspective, but the problem is that when you create structures around these perspectives, the disagreements are not necessarily based only on the merits of the issue. The disagreements are often driven by turf wars. So it's my turf versus your turf, not necessarily what is in the collective interest. So now this fragmentation has also been increased, I would assert, by promotion of internal bureaucratic interests, where you get more posts of secretary, therefore more posts of additional secretary, therefore more promotions, therefore more posts, and so on. But what that has done is, while it may increase efficiency of implementation, it has greatly reduced the integration of policy making. So how do you tackle this? So one thing which we tried to do was to reform the structure in some cases, but I don't have the time to go into that here. Two things that are more easy to do. One is we created some short-term structural fixes. So we created a tax policy council headed by the finance minister, in which the economic policy secretary, the revenue secretary, the indirect taxes, the direct taxes were all part of it, and we said we won't look at budget proposals until it comes through this integrated council view. So it's not a replacement of the structure, it's creating one more structure, but it's a structure that has to integrate. It doesn't always work, but it sometimes works. The other thing we did is to use process improvements to overcome the fragmentation. So at one stage, I referred to the issue of domestic preference in government procurement. So at one point, a decision was taken that we will introduce domestic preference in government procurement, but nothing happened. There were too many ministries, they were squabbling, they had different points of view. So we then decided we would actually get it done, and we did get it done in 5 weeks. Now, how did we do that? Week 1, the Prime Minister's office produced a draft policy. We just produced a draft policy based on what we knew from the different ministries. We gave everyone 1 week in which to get their comments back to us. And we said that anybody not commenting would have been deemed to have agreed. So that was sure to ensure that the comments would come in. And the comments did come in within a week. At the end of week 2, we held a long meeting in the Prime Minister's office, chaired by the Principal Secretary. About 80% of the differences got resolved at that meeting, but 20% difficult issues remained. We then produced a second draft in week 3 and gave the ministries 3 days in which to give their comments on the second draft. So they did give their comments. And in the final version, we had about 5% issues remaining unresolved, which we took to the Prime Minister, got an executive decision, and then implemented. So it got implemented. It may not be perfect, but we actually got it done. So, and then, of course, the procedures were followed. Prime Minister spoke to the ministers and so on, and it all got done. So it's one way that we got around the problem. So now let me move off from these specific anecdotes to some general suggestions. Some steps which can energize project implementation. First, greater attention to project design in terms of involving people other than professional designers of projects. I mean, other than people who are technically specialized in those projects. And factoring in implementation issues and the perspective of implementers before you finalize the design. I think this is a practice that I think usually produces good results. Second, don't leave technical decisions to technical people. Technical decisions need the inputs of technical people, but they also need the inputs of people who actually have to implement projects. Third, in procurement, especially very large, significant procurement transactions, do get the seller's perspective before you finalize your specifications, but do it transparently, fairly, not to favor one particular supplier, not to be exclusive, but to be inclusive. Fourth, subject your projects to expert analysis and find innovative ways to get experts to work for you. Some suggestions on energizing policy making. If you can reduce fragmentation in some of these over-fragmented sectors, try to do it. If you can't, find alternatives in terms of structural short-term solutions or process solutions. Here again, use expert outside advice. It's very valuable, and people are often willing to contribute to government pro bono. You have to be a little bit careful about whether they have views that they are trying to advance for their own industry, but not everybody who comes and gives pro bono advice is actually seeking to do something underhand. Many of them are actually just trying to be helpful. And some suggestions on the provision of citizen services. I would suggest that we need to do, I'm saying this without knowing anything about Sri Lanka, but every job that I've held in my career, I have found that we can increase the delegation of authority to lower levels. In fact, now almost as a rule of thumb, if I go to a new job, I say, when was your delegation of powers last fixed? If they say less than 3 years, I say double everything. If they say more than 3 years, I say quadruple everything. And then I say, come back to me if you don't agree. Prove to me why it can't be increased. Because delegation of powers to lower levels usually gets stultified over a period of time. More and more decisions with inflation get pushed up the ladder, and they get slowed down, and powers of lower officers are often eclipsed simply by inflation. And it's not often that we choose to increase them. Increasing powers of subordinates energizes them. You get a few more mistakes, yes, but you get much more speed. So with few exceptions, I would say delegate a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Somanathan. That was a very useful laying out of the ground of the issues that distinguish. I think the most important thing is government is different from the private sector. That's what I'm trying to get across, right? That, I think, has been highlighted. අපිට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න මොනවද? අපිට තියෙන සුවිශේෂ ප්‍රශ්න මොනවද? ඒ ප්‍රශ්න ගැන කල්පනා කරනකොට අපේ ලංකාවේ අපි හිතන් ඉන්නවා මේ අමාත්‍යාංශ 50ද කීයක්ද මට ගානවත් දන්නේ නැහැ. මම 52ක් තියෙනවා. 52ක්. මේක අපි හිතන් ඉන්නවා අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් කියලා. බැලින්නම් ඒක හැමතැනම තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක්. මේ ෆ්‍රැග්මන්ටේෂන්, ඒ බලය විමධ්‍යගත වෙලා තැන් තැන් වල විසිරලා තියෙන එක, ඒක හැමතැනම තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක්. මම එතකොට මේ සාකච්ඡාව ආරම්භ කරන්න යනවා අත් වශයෙන්ම එතුමා සඳහන් කරපු දෙයක්. නමුත් වැඩි විස්තර කතා කරපු නැති දෙයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ කිව්වා we must almost assume that there is going to be a appeal to the courts, to the legal system. කියලා අර procurement මේ ඉඩම් ගන්න අවස්ථාව ගැන කතා කරනකොට. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Abeysinghe, given your, you and I are both, well, actually we have several grey-haired people here, but I take great pride in my grey hair. අපි ඉතින් අත්දැකීම් තියෙන කට්ටියනේ. දැන් ඔබතුමාගේ අත්දැකීම අනුව 70 ගණන් වල ඉඳන් අපේ පරිපාලන සේවයේ ඉඳලා අපි දැන් තව අපි වැඩිපුර අධිකරණයත් එක්ක අපේ සම්බන්ධකම් වැඩිද? මේ සමහරක් වෙලාවට අපේ ප්‍රමාදයන් අපි වැඩක් කරන්නේ නැහැ කියලා කියනකොට ඒක යම් ප්‍රමාණයකට ඒ අධිකරණය එක්ක තියෙන සහසම්බන්ධතාවය වැඩිවීම නිසා ඇති වුණ දෙයක්ද? My question is the relationship between the judiciary, the judicial processes and administrative processes may have increased. In India, Dr. Somanathan said it's almost an assumption that they will have to go to court. So how have the institutions changed to adapt to this change, this new developments, is my question to you, sir. Stand, whatever you want.
No English.
Any language or both is my preference, sir.
Basically, the question was, why more litigation now? And does it affect the functioning of the government seriously? Isn't it?
Yes.
It's true that more and more decisions of the government are being challenged in courts now because people are using their right. I mean, people have right to challenge the government decisions. So they are using it more frequently than before. That is a problem for implementing various programs. But we can't prevent people going before courts or any aggrieved party seeking redress from any appellate authority. That we have to respect. But as government officials, what we can do is, we can identify the causes more often, cited in courts. One is the non-adherence to the procedures. That is being quoted very well. On the other hand, we are blamed for adhering to the procedures. Normally, the bureaucrat is the public servant who overly concerned with the procedural correctness. So that is we are trying, or we are society and the private sector expects from the public service to not to adhere too much, but to be sort of liberal or use discretion and take quick decision. But that using discretion, of course, the subject, there is hardly room for discretion in the public sector, I must say, because we are governed by the constitutional provisions and the financial regulations, procurement guidelines, and establishment codes, and various legislation. So therefore, we have to use the limited avenues given in those that are governance framework. By using that, what we could do is to, especially in procurement area, what is challenge in most cases is, basically the argument is that we were not given fair chance and we were treated unfairly. Those are the things. Now, when it goes to courts, but they started sort of checking whether you have followed the correct procedure. So that's why the government officials have to be more sort of particular of the adhering to the correct procedure, which is somewhat contrary to the expectation of the society. So our advice is to our colleagues at various fora is to make sure that the correct procedure is followed so that it will not be questioned, or even it is questioned in courts, that you can avoid granting leave to proceed so that that can be terminated. So that is one aspect. Second thing is, there are other appellate authorities, especially with regard to procurement. There is a procurement appeal board. Now, all aggrieved tenderers go before the appeal board, and then appeal board conducts inquiry. In the past, what happened was these appellants used to bring a team of eminent lawyers to the appeal board, and on the one side, non-professional or non-lawyer public servants. So it has sort of gone too far from sort of concentrating on whether the decision was taken judiciously, or whether it's fair by thing, or whether the value for money is there, but more and more of the sort of procedural aspects. So what we did was, we impose a condition that legal representation can be done by way of only written submission. So to avoid this thing, so that now it works well, you know, that no written. Other thing is that other than going before the courts, of course, tender matters are the one which goes. But the one is land acquisition, what Dr. Somanathan mentioned. Land acquisition, perhaps all of you are aware, the delay in completing the Southern Expressway is basically due to the litigation on land acquisition. That, of course, government the bureaucrats can't, or rather government officials can't do that much in that regard. We have suggested to government to amend the legislation number of occasions. As far as I know, I don't know, subject to correction by Dr. Somanathan, in our country, the acquisition can be challenged at any stage. Acquisition per se can be challenged. But in India, subject to correction, what I know is that only the landowner can go to courts only regarding the compensation quantum. So that we are more liberal, and there are a lot of rooms for grievance handling. So that is a problem. But in a way, that has sort of inbuilt positive development. That is, now government servants have to be more judicious. They have to be more concerned with what they were taking decision. They have to take very fair decision. They have to be mindful that their decision will be challenged. So that culture, that knowledge, that perception is very good, because that is what is called all about the good governance. Adhering to good rules and regulations to ensure that the fair play will take place. So therefore, I see both sides. There's a good aspect as well as the positive aspect, as well as some negative aspect. But anyway, that is, we have to accept as it is. Only thing is, through legal system, there are a lot of reforms are being contemplated, or rather introduced. That is to increase the number of high courts, commercial high courts. Like that, there are and day by day trial procedures. The legal sector, or rather judicial sector, there is ample room for improvement. That if that is taking place, I think the litigation won't be that much of an issue. Thank you.
I neglected to formally introduce our panel. I'm not going to read out all the details. That was Mr. Sumith Abeysinghe, Secretary to the Cabinet. And to his left is Dr. R.H.S. Samaratunga, Secretary to Treasury of the Ministry of Finance and Mass Media. And to my right is Mr. Sunil Hettiarachchi, Secretary to the Ministry of Education. And to his right is Ms. Chandanie Wijayawardhana, Secretary to the Ministry of Development Strategies and international trade. So I will come to each one of them. But at this point, may I just ask for a brief comment from Dr. Somanathan on the issue of the interaction between the administrative processes and the legal processes and the delays. If I may just interject something. In India, as everybody knows, I work in the field of telecom and regulation. My colleagues there were making up a compendium of laws and decisions of legal practice. So they were asking me, can you suggest some decisions from Sri Lanka? I said, no, there's nothing. So they said, what, you people don't litigate? I said, no, we litigate. We just don't give decisions. We start the cases. And then the stay order is all we worry about. After that, who knows what happens? I haven't seen a single decision on a telecom-related case, of which there have been many. So,
the issue of court interventions in administrative action is very, very salient in India, probably more than in any other country which follows the Westminster style of parliamentary democracy. This is because while the principles of judicial intervention in administrative action, which have been framed in the English courts or in the Canadian, Australian courts, they assume a certain level of deference where they would intervene only when the action taken by the government is manifestly arbitrary or, contrary to established procedure and so on. Over a period of time, the Indian courts have taken a very activist position on this, and they've widened the ambit of judicial review to an extent that I don't think has been matched in any other parliamentary democracy. And as a matter of opinion, I would suggest that Sri Lanka should not copy India in this regard. So as a result of which today, when we do anything in India, it is almost instinctive that we look at a defensive mechanism against unnecessary court interventions. So we actually plan for it. So if you like what I was describing about the land acquisition, the reason we are so sensitive to land acquisition is that if I get that wrong, that can stop the whole project. And everything else can be done well, and you can get thrown off by interventions. As Mr. Abeysinghe said, the previous legal position in India was well established that so long as the government declares something to be a public purpose, the courts will ordinarily not go into it unless it is something very perverse or very odd. They will not question the public purpose and will only get into the issue of compensation. However, again, in recent years, we have had a new act passed in 2013, which makes it incumbent on us to reduce the extent of land acquisition as much as possible. Fortunately for me, this didn't exist in the early phases of the Chennai Metro. It's there now. And the courts have also become a little more sensitive to whether the acquisition is necessary at all. But by and large, they normally don't question the necessity of the public purpose, which also is the recent American position. The eminent domain can be used even to set up a private shopping mall. The US Supreme Court has decided that if the government decides that that will help rebuild the city center, then they can actually acquire land and construct a private shopping mall. So what is a public purpose is not normally questioned in most countries. It's questioned to some extent in India. But in India, judicial review is now the maximum that you can have in any democracy. So almost any decision is liable to be questioned.
අපේ ආචාර්ය සමරතුංගගෙන් මම අහන්නේ අපේ දැන් අපි එක පැතිකඩක් විතරක් මෙතන අපි බැලුවා අපේ රජයේ සේවය අපේ පරිපාලන සේව නිලධාරීන් අපේ මොකක් හරි අඩුවක් තියෙනවා නම් අපිට ඉස්සරහට යන්න බැරි කමක් තියෙනවා නම් අපේ ජවයේ හිඟ තියෙනවා නම් ඒකට යම් ප්‍රමාණයකට අපේ ඒ ප්‍රමාණයම අපේ සංඛ්‍යාව ආචාර්ය සමරතුංග the volume, the numbers that we have, is that a factor? Is it a mindset problem? ඔබතුමාගෙන් අපට අදහස් කීපයක් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්ද? කලින් එකටත් ඕනනම් ඔබතුමාට කැමති නම් ඒ ගැනත් කතා කරත හැකියි. Of course.
I have few numbers that might be useful for the discussion here. I was wondering, for some time, what the Sri Lanka's bureaucracy is. Maybe for about 30 years or so. I didn't have, the fairly a comprehensive idea about, the country's bureaucracy, what the country's bureaucracy is. We are a small country of 21 million people. But everybody knows that, we are three layers of government. National government, provincial council came 30 years ago, and local government coming from the 19th century. And we have government policies. Those are quite common. There are entities manned by, the employees. There are expenditure and revenue, personal emoluments, and more importantly, rules, regulations, backed by laws. Then there are practices of organization. You all are familiar with formal and informal organization. It's common to public sector as well. We have hierarchies and accountability. This is the most important one in today's parlance, which accountability is all the way it goes up to the parliament, sometimes beyond parliament into courts of law, and sometimes beyond our territories as well into Singapore, arbitration, and some other places as well. Then we have input and output relationship within the organization and in the entire government, and unions and the organizational culture built into various entities you may have come across in your day-to-day life. Look at some of the numbers that we have. There are two entities in our parliament, the government agencies and semi-government agencies in bureaucratic terms. Government entities are managed by, when it comes to accountability, Parliamentary Committee on Public Accounts. The other one is Parliamentary Committee on Public Enterprises. We have for COPA, 841 entities. For COP, we have 410 entities by the end of last year. Altogether, we have 1,251 entities in the government. And in terms of employment population, we have 15,60,000 people across all the entities everywhere in the country and in the government. And in SOEs, we have 225,000. The rest of the government, we have 13,35,000. And in terms of the financial outlays to maintain this workforce, we pay salaries and pension in 2018, some 900 billion. 900 billion will flow from the Treasury. Country's total revenue is for 2018, 2,040 billion, just 2 trillion. Just imagine the amount of money we'll put into the maintenance of the state bureaucracy. Every 100 rupee we get, 44 rupees are spent on public employees. Then Dr. Somanathan, when he was referring to the turf battle, I know that India is the huge country with a lot of population, many states, and many bureaucracies and of various layers, include all the way up to the local government agencies. We are 21 million people, and he was referring to turf battle. The coming to the reaching a final goal at the delivery level. Although we are a small country, the size of the government is huge, and you can just imagine the complexities and the battle we have, the every day at every layer. The private sector and the consumers demand, the efficient service deliveries by the government, but we have to go through a harangue of, the practices, layers of, the bureaucracies and regulations and laws and, the decisions and practices to come to, this something that is acceptable to you. Always there are delays and unacceptable outcomes and inefficient deliveries as well. Therefore, we have two things in Singaland, when it comes from bureaucratic sense, and also from consumers or the recipient or citizen sense, kisima wadak karaganna bෑ. This is what you say, kisima wadak wenne naha. For bureaucrats we say, මොනවත් කරන්න බෑ මේක ඇතුලේ. But just imagine the level of coordination that we require when we have large government and complex bureaucracies. But we need to run, of course we know that the private sector is the engine of growth, and we have kept on telling at least for the last 40 years or so, continuously. But the bureaucracy has to support that process. But when it comes to manage bureaucracies to looking at the outcome you require, there are the many complex processes that we have to go through. Government is not a company. We are a rule-based organization. We are accountable to Parliament and finally to people as well one day. Therefore, when the government get large and bureaucracies get enlarged every day, and the outcome that you expect is going to be, the very difficult, sometimes hilarious task. I'll stop at this stage. If you have questions on those numbers and the complexities that we come across every day, I'm happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samaratunga. දැන් අපේ මගේ මිත්‍ර සුනිල් හෙටියාරච්චි මහත්මයාගෙන් මම ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහනවා. මේ වැඩක් කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා කියන එක මම අහලා නැහැ ඔබතුමාගේ කටින් කියනවා. ඔබතුමා ආගමන විගමන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවේ ඉතාම ක්‍රියාශීලී භූමිකාවක් රඟපෑවා. ඔබතුමා විශ්‍රාම වැටුප් දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවේ ලොකු වැඩ කොටසක් කරා. දැන් අධ්‍යාපන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව ඊට කලින් අර ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් ස්ට්‍රැටජිස් ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් මිනිස්ට්‍රි එකේ හිටියා. මම හිතන්නේ ඔය ශැංග්‍රීලා හෝටලේ අර මේව සම්බන්ධව වැඩ කරා. කොහොමද මේක කරන්නේ? අපි වැඩක් කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියවට අපි සමහරු වැඩ කරනවා. I'm basically asking him that systemic change blocks don't seem to have stopped some of our officials from delivering. But what are his views on this creative solutions?
සුතේ ආචාර්යතුමනි මට ඔබේ පිළිතුරට පෙර පොඩි කරුණක් කිරියට දෙන්න මම විශ්වාස කරනවා මේ ඔඩියන්ස් කියන සියලු දෙනාම දන්නවා ඇති කියලා 80 ගණන් අපි කතා කරා මේ reinventing government කියලා. තච්චර මෙතනිය කාලේ ලෝකේ වෙනසක් කතා ඊට පස්සේ ඒක ආවා ඊළඟ ප්‍රයිම් මිනිස්ටර් ජෝන් මේයර් ඉතින් කවුරුද ඊළඟ හිටියේ ටෝනි බ්ලෙයර් කාලේ කතා කරා මේ banishing bureaucracy කියලා. අපි අද කතා කරනවා energizing bureaucracy කියලා. මට ලොකු ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා මාතෘකාව පිළිබඳ. ඉතින් මම හිතන්නේ අපි මේ energize කරන්නේ නැතුව මම ආසයි banishing කරන වැඩේට ආසයි. ඒකින්ද මේ මට ලේසි වුණා මේ අර ආයතන සියල්ලම මම වෙන විදිහට දකින හින්දා ඒ bureaucracy ගැන වැඩ කරනවා. මම හිතන්නේ අපේ ડોક્ટર සමරත්නයි අපේ සීනියර් මහත්මරු දෙනා කියපු දේ ඔක්කොම ඇත්ත. මේ rule base ආයතනයක් ඇතුළේ නැත්තම් මේ ප්‍රැග්මන්ට් වෙච්ච සිස්ටම් එකක් ඇතුළේ වැඩ කරනකොට හැබැයි මට ලේසුණ මගේ ප්‍රවේශය බොහෝ වෙලාවට මම මේ සේවාලාභියා නැත්තම් මේ කස්ටමර් ඔරියන්ටේෂන් එක කියන පැත්තට නැඹුරු වෙන්න ගත්තා. ඒකෙද එතන ඉඳලා මට හොයන්න පුළුවන් වුණා මේ අලුත් ක්‍රමයන් අර කිව්වාගේ reinventing නෙමෙයි rethinking නැත්නම් මේ වෙලාවේ අපිට අවශ්‍ය රාජ්‍ය සේවයට අලුත් thinkings. ඒක අරගෙන આવොත් මම හිතන්නේ මේ තියෙන ground rule ඇතුලේ වුණත් අපිට productive නැත්නම් outcome oriented වැඩක් කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම මට මතක් වෙනවා මම ගියාම මේ pension department එකට මේ ලංකාවේ සීනියර්ම රාජ්‍ය සේවකයෙක් වසර 35ක් 36ක් 37ක් වැඩ කළා pension එක ගන්නකොට අවුරුදු ගණන් බලාගෙන ඉන්න තියෙනවා. අපි සියලුම දේවල් වෙනස් කළා. අද වෙනකොට මම හිතන්නේ pension එක මොහොතකින් බැංකුගත වෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ කිසිම cash flow එකේ ප්‍රශ්නකුත් නැහැ. customer ප්‍රශ්නකුත් නැහැ. අද වෙනකොට මම දන්නවා මම හිතන්නේ අපි මේ වගේ තත්යකට ඇති කරා. මොකද අපි සේවාලාභියාට සේවය කරන්න ඕන කියන ආකල්පය ඔලුවට ආවා නම් මම හිතන්නේ ඒක කරගන්න ලේසි. වෙන මොකුත් බාධාවක් නැහැ. අපි ඉමිග්‍රේෂන් එකේ වුණත් මම හිතන්නේ බොහෝ දෙලාවට අපි වහලා තිබිච්ච ආයතන විවෘත කරන්න ගත්තා. මොකද කස්ටමර් කෙනෙක් හිතලා අද වෙනකොට ඔබ දන්නවා ලංකාවේ හොඳ ඉලෙක්ට්‍රොනික වේගෙන් වැඩ කරන මම ET එක තියෙන අද වීසා එකක් වුණත් ඔන්ලයින් ගන්න පුළුවන් මට මෙහෙලා මම ඒ ටයිම් දෙනකොට එයාපෝට් එකත් ඔටෝ ගේට් දාලා ඔන්ලයින් වැඩ කරන මට වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ தත්ත්වෙට ආයතන පරිවර්තනය ඉවෝල්විං වෙලා යනවා. ඉතින් මම විශ්වාස කරනවා මේ බියුරෝක්‍රසි ඇතුලේ වුණත් අපිට ගොඩක් දේවල් කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේක අර ක්ලැරිටි එක ඔබ්ජෙක්ටිව් පාර්ටිසිපේෂන්. මොකද අපි බොහෝ වෙලාවට රාජ්‍ය සේවකයෝ මම හිතන අපේ සීනියර් මහත්මරු දෙනවා කිව්වාගේ අපි වෙන්නේ ප්‍රින්සිපල් ඒජන්ට් රිලේෂන්ෂිප් එක. ඉලෙක්ටඩ් මෙම්බර්ස්ලා ඉන්න ඔබ කියන වගේ ඉලෙක්ටඩ් මෙම්බර්ස්ලා ඉන්න මන්ත්‍රීවරු ඇමතිවරු ඔක්කොම ඉලෙක්ටඩ්. ඒගොල්ලෝ අපොයින්ට් කරගන්න අපුව මොකටද ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ මැනිෆෙස්ටෝ එකේ තියෙන සේවාව දෙන්න. මේ රිලේෂන්ෂිප් එක ඇතුලේ තියෙන දුර්වලතාවය අන්ට්‍රස්ට් ඒක දැන් බලපාලා තියෙන අද වෙනකොට මම හිතන්නේ මේ ප්‍රොඩක්ටිව් විදියට රාජ්‍යශ්‍රී යන්න හැමදෙන ඔය ලිටිගේෂන් වෙන්නේ people never trust about our decision. We are so biased. ඒ වගේ තත්ත්වක හින්දා දෝ කියලා තමයි මම අද වෙනකොට විශේෂම අපිට procurement decision එකක් ගන්න බැරි තත්ත්වයට ඇවිල්ලා. මම විශ්වාස කරනවා මම හිතන්නේ අර බැනේෂින් බියුරෝක්‍රසි එක ඇතුළේ යෝජනා කරපු enterprising governments නැත්තම් අපිට ඕන entrepreneurial government එකක් එතෙන්ට එන තත්ත්වයට මේ බියුරෝක්‍රසි එක හැරුණොත් මම හිතන්නේ මේ රටේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මහජනයා තමන්ගේ ඡන්ද දීලා පත් කරන නියෝජිතයන්ගෙන් රට බලාපොරොත්තු තියෙන නැත්නම් ඔවුන් ඔබට ඉදිරිපත් කරපු මැනිෆෙස්ටෝ එකේ තියෙන දේවල් ඉතා විශේෂ ලෙස අපිට වාර්ෂිකව අයවැය තුලින් ඉෂ්ට කරලා මේ රටේ ජනතාව තෘප්තිමත් ජනතාව බවට පත් කරන්න පුළුවන්. අර මම දැන් ડોક્ટર සමරතුංග වගේ හැම ආයතනෙම වෙන සේවලාභියා යන්නේ මේ ආයතන වල වැඩක් නැහැ කියන චේතනාව වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ක්‍රමවේදයන් සහ විශේෂම නායකත්වය සහ ඒ තියෙන ක්ලැරිටි එක පිළිබඳ තියෙන අවබෝධය. මම දන්නවා ඊළඟ ප්‍රශ්නය අහන එක මහාචාර්යතුමා ඒක කොහොමද දැනගන්නේ කියලා. මම හිතන්නේ ඒකට ඉඩ තියලා මම නවතිනවා. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
So basically, I'm going to summarize what Mr. Hettiarachchi is saying is it's not energizing, but reinventing and rethinking that is necessary. It is true that we are rule-bound, but what if we start instead from a customer-centric orientation? We begin from the customer or the citizen and figure out what he or she wants and how can we deliver that in an efficient manner, keeping the focus on the outcomes. So that is his thought. He says we have to reinvent government in order to deliver these kinds of services that are needed. මම එකට එක අභියෝගයක් මතු කරනවා මේ හෙට්ටිආරච්චි මහත්මයා මේ හැම එකම මේ ආණ්ඩු මේ මහ ජනතාවට සේවය කිරීමක් නෙමෙයි. සමහරක් දේවල් අපි ප්‍රතිපත්ති හදන්න ඕනේ, අපි සමාගම් එක්ක වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ, අපි වෙනත් ආණ්ඩු වෙනත් රාජ්‍යයන් එක්ක වැඩ කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒවා මහ ජනයාට තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි අර පසුබිම හදන්න ඕනේ. අපි සමහර වෙලාවට යටිතල පහසුකම් ආණ්ඩුව ඇතුලේ අපි හදන්න ඕනේ. අපි හිතමු identification. අපි හිතමු land database එකක්. ඒ වගේ දේවල් මහජනයාට ඇත්තටම තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ සම්පත් පාවිච්චි කරලා තමයි මහජනයාට හොඳ සේවාවක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. එවැනි දේවල් කිරීමේදී මම හිතන්නේ ඔය customer centric කියන එක මදි නේද?
එකයි. එතන ඇහිලා පසුතලය සකස් කරන අපි කියන මේ ඔය database නැත්නම් ඔය කියන ඔක්කොම දත්ත පද්ධති වල කියන පසුතලය. ඒ පසුතලයේ තියෙන දත්ත පාවිච්චි කරලා මම හිතන පාලකයන්ටත් මහජනතාවටත් තීරණ ගන්න පුළුවන්. මම හිතන්නේ ඒකින්ද රජයේ කළ යුතු දේවල් වෙනම තියෙනවා. අධ්‍යාපන සෞඛ්‍ය වගේ දේවල් ලෝකෙම අඳුරගෙන තියෙනවා. ඒ වෙලාව public goods ඒ public goods අපයන්න ඕන රජය කියන එක මම දැන් ලෝකේ කවුරුත් දන්න දෙයක්. එතකොට ඊට අමතරව මම විශ්වාස කරන මහාචාර්යතුමනි ඒ වගේ ඔබත් විශ්වාස කරා අද රජයේ ආයතන වල කරන්න තියෙන කාර්යභාරය ඉතාම කෙටි. අද වෙනකොට මම හිතන්නේ පුජ්‍යලිකාංශය අභිමුඛ යනවා. අපි කියන මේ third sector එක කියලා. තුන්වෙනි අංශයක් විශේෂයෙන් ඔබ දන්නවා මේ public trust කියලා ලංකාවේ ආණ්ඩුවෙන් හදලා තියෙන trustersලා. අද ලෝකේ trust ඕන්තර ඔබ දන්නවා ලෝකේ තියෙන trust. ඒවා public නැද non profit organization. ඒවා අද ලංකාවේ විතර ලෝකෙම සේවා සැපීමේදී ඉතා ප්‍රබලය බවට පත්වලා ඉන්නවා. ලංකාව තුලත් ඔබට නොදන්නුනාට විශේෂයෙන් මහජනයා ලබන බොහෝ සේවල් including මගේ අධ්‍යාපනය ගත්තත් ඔබ දන්නේ නැතුණාට අපි ඉස්කෝල 25ක් පාලනය කරනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ විශේෂයෙන්ම ආබාධිත දරුවෝ ඉන්න ඉස්කෝල අපිට පාලනය කරන්න බෑ. ඒ ඉස්කෝල අපි සල්ලි දීලා අපි ෆන්ඩ් එක දුන්නාට ඒක පරිපාලනය සම්පූර්ණ කරන්නේ පුජ්‍යලික third sector එක. හැබැයි ඒක ලංකාවේ මතුවෙලා ඇහිල්ලා නැහැ. එවැනි third sector එක මතුවගෙන එනවා ඉස්සරහට. ඒකින්ද මම විශ්වාස කරනවා ඔබ කිව්ව වැනි බොහෝ පසුතලයන් සූදානම් කරාට පස්සේ ඒ සියලු දේවල් බෙදහැරීමට වෙන ආයතන පද්ධතීන් ඕනතරම් සමාජයේ එදිනෙදා බිහි වෙනවා. ඒකත් එක්ක රජයේ තියෙන කාර්යභාරය මම විශ්වාස කරනවා එන්න අඩු වෙනවා. අපිට තියෙන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ ඉලෙක්ෂන් අපිට තියෙන්නේ අර කියන පසුතලයේ හදනවා. දැන් පාර හැදුවට පස්සේ අවුරුදු ගානේ පාර හදන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. පාරවල් ටික හැදුනා පස්සේ ලංකාවේ මධ්‍යපතර වර්ග කිලෝමීටර ගණන් කව වෙන්න මම හිතන්නේ ඕනනම් ඔය ඔබ හංගෙදි ඉන්දියාවේ මෙට්‍රෝ එක හදනකොට තත්ත්වෙයි. හරි අපිට තව කෝච්චි පාරවල් දැම්මම හදන්න ඊට පස්සේ සර්විස් සැපයීම. අද ලෝකේ දියුණුවද ඩිලිවර් ලොජික් කියලා වචනයක් කියලා. ඒක අද නිකන් සාහිත්‍යයක් බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා ඩිලිවරි කියන එක. අද ලෝකේ කතා කරන ඩිලිවර් ලොජි. ඒ කියන්නේ සූලොජි, බයොලොජි ඒ වගේ තත්ත්වයට අද මේක පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ විශාල සංකල්පය ඩිලිවරි කියන එක. ඉතින් මම හිතන්නේ රජය ෆේල් එතෙන්දී ඩිලිවරි එකේදී. මමත් ඇතුළුව කාටවත් දොස් කියලා මමත් ඇතුළුව අපි යම් දේවල් සක්සස් වුණාට මම හිතන්නේ මහජනයා සේවල්ලාභියා තාමත් තෘප්ති නැහැ කියන එක තමයි මම ඉන්නේ.
So my question to him was that we can't have customer centricity as the governing principle for all government services because there are certain things that are behind the scene that enable, for example, identification, land registries, various things like that, that enable us to provide these services, but we may have to think about them differently. So he gave an answer. He says, delivery is the most important thing. Let's get the infrastructural elements, the basic conditions right. And then, but still the driver has to be delivery, has to be citizen centricism, has to be outcomes. මම ඊට පස්සේ කල්පනා කරේ විජයවර්ධන මහත්මයා අපේ translation. Development strategies and international trade. I can't be translating this. MODSET, right? So she's the secretary of MODSET. This is a new thinking. I don't think we've ever had a ministry like this before. I worked in a strange ministry called Ministry for Economic Reforms and Science and Technology or something many years ago. That was also a strange animal. But this is also one of those things. And when I see this, I see almost the recognition that the old silos are not working. That in the old days, we used to think international trade is over here, that is in one silo. National development, domestic policies are over here, that is in a different silo. And at most, they will meet once in 3 months or once in 6 months. But in Mrs. Wijayawardhana's ministry, these things are integrated. Are you the future? Are you the future? Is this the new silo-breaking design? මේ අපේ අනාගත ව්‍යුහයද මේ ඔබතුමියගේ අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන් අපිට දකින්න ලැබෙන්නේ?
I'm not a good speaker at all. I have to admit that. And please bear with me if I'm not properly communicating it to you. But this is a struggle we make. This ministry, and when he said it gives scares me when he introduced this ministry and the kind of expectations coming from this ministry as a future of Sri Lanka. It scares me. It really the struggle we are having now. So we at the ministry first need to understand the client, our client. So it was to become more people-centric. In many phases, it can be the consumer. It comes to international trade, businessmen, the companies who are waiting for employment. It can be in many phases, really. So in this task, we were assigned. We were not from the Gazette, but we had to create from the Gazette a lot of work. Many of them were reforms. So it was a great struggle implementing reforms, having and building trust with citizens in many phases. It was a real struggle that we are coming as a new ministry. We did not have many ministries are very old well-structured ministries. This is a new ministry with hardly very few staff. So understanding the client and understanding the kind of task we have. Of course, it was a greater scale of coordination we had to do. So there are, when Professor Samarajiva said ModSit, I think we have somewhat created a brand for a ministry. It is, for the moment I know, it has not earned a lot of good comments. That I know. There are so many, both good and bad criticisms. We have, people are demanding certain things. The challenge we have is, still we don't have the whole of government approach. And when the work is done in this ministry, it is essentially a multi-stakeholder task we have. We need several percentage of greater stakeholder coordination. That missing element is a real challenge to us. When we implement reforms, it is not necessarily the reforms are implemented by other agencies, but the expectation is with us. So it has been a very difficult task, and to fulfill the expectations of the citizens in many phases. And the building trust has become a real challenge. With these 3 years of experience in this ministry, the other challenge we have is the high touch we require. This ministry needs a lot of work, commitment to create a high touch, for people to understand what exactly the outcome is. And it is the biggest challenge is, unlike any other ministry, what we deliver, the result will be in medium to long term time. So that really is very difficult to convince, and I think I'll stop from there.
Dr. Samaratunga would like to add to that.
To complement, what Ms. Wijayawardhana said, when this new ministry was, created, we had to, the government may have, the thought, probably, have, the different perspectives, to look at, the country's economy is probably from a different perspective. You all know that, our total GDP is 87 billion. You have to raise the country's welfare, you cannot take, everything by, the improving, the country's, the internal consumption. Need to get, somehow, the Sri Lanka has to get into the external world. And this trust of this ministry is to, look at, the both, the inward bound, outward bound, the goods and services trade, as well as, the investment as well, therefore, the crafting this, the new ministry to look at carefully to improve our, the trade sector performance, outward bound, inward bound trade performance, and also investment is key to raise the level of country's welfare, total welfare, raising the economic performance as well. You all know that the small countries have to go out into world to raise, the internal welfare. There is no other way, the internal consumption is not so little that we can, therefore, the look at, the small countries in Asia, like, Singapore, Hong Kong, or Taiwan, the total trade is, the several times more than, the country's total GDP. Therefore, the probably may have, the government may have thought that we need a different entity to manage this sector. This is key and the way forward as well.
I am now going to the third phase of our session, your questions, of which there are many. I'm just going to read a whole cluster of questions that are related, and I'm going to invite the panel to respond. With a world record number of ministries, how can Sri Lanka's bureaucracy function without being a bureau crazy? Question. For Dr. Somanathan, Indian bureaucracy is criticized, but hailed for its solid, consistent ability to run the country. Ours is criticized for being political. How did India manage the bureaucracy to be not political? Mr. Hettiarachchi, in Sri Lanka, English literacy is low, but Hindi literacy is high. In Sri Lanka, Hindi literacy is high. Wow. Do you think we failed in teaching English as the population learned Hindi without schools teaching it? What is the panel's view on major civil service reform? That is to substantially reduce the size of the civil service, then pay those left with much higher salaries. What would be the major obstacle to this, and can they be surmounted? Then there was a question about VRS even. Does the panel believe that the insufficient salaries for government sector is the main reason for bribery and corruption? Ministry secretary is supposed to be a professional who runs the ministry. Minister is the politician. But today secretaries are running around with minister doing politics, then spending time at the ministry. Can we not change this culture? Well, there's a whole series of questions on those lines. So what I would like the panel to take that whole cluster and give some relatively tight, short responses, because we have, we have 25 minutes in all. Abeysinghe, you want to start? That, any of them. You can pick any of them. You don't have to answer all of them. Just pick anything you wish.
With regard to the multiplicity of ministries, that of course we can't help it when there is a coalition government. You have to have so many ministries. I know it's a burden to the people. That of course we have to live with it, because the people have not given clear mandate to one party to form a government. So that is that problem is there. That's beyond the control of bureaucracy. Number two, given that situation, we are trying our best to have not to lose efficiency in public service. What we do is decisions are taken by government, policy decisions are taken by the cabinet. The cabinet is the highest executive arm of the government. The constitution itself says the cabinet is vested with powers of direction and control of the government. For that purpose, when making policy decisions, the usual practice is for the line ministries to send cabinet memoranda. We get observations of other ministries, and we are trying our best to get a more rational decision in consultation with all the parties, all the ministries, all the disciplines. Even at a time when especially when formulating laws, that is something which the cabinet should which cabinet takes more time. Most of the legislation which are passed by parliament is first formulated and deliberated at the cabinet level. So therefore at that also we are getting inputs from all the ministries. So that's that's how we sort of try to get over try to deal with the situation. Too many bureaucracy, true. And question with regard to the I think Somanathan will respond to the political situation here. But here, perhaps you may be not aware that Constitution itself provides for the politicians to have a control over the bureaucracy, whether we like it or not. It says when it regard to the when we talk about the secretaries of ministries have to perform under the direction and supervision or direction of the minister. That is clearly says Article 52 of the Constitution. So naturally, that element is there. But one thing is that both politicians and bureaucracy, they have one aim, that is to serve people. The problem is the approach is different. Bureaucracy is trying to do it impartially and with least cost and the fair manner. Politician wants to get result very quickly. So the approach is different. That the differences between bureaucracy or controversies between the bureaucracy and politicians emanates from the fact that we are trying to be mindful of a majority of public servants to use the scarce resources very efficiently and economically, and be mindful the fact that it comes from the people. Especially in Sri Lanka, the taxes are, we get more revenue from indirect taxes, or that is taxes on consumption, a very regressive form of taxation. So we are mindful of that, and we are trying our best to use, to economically use the resources. But politicians in turn, they want to get the things immediately. The cost is not that much concern for them. So what they say is do that fast. So that problem is there. But anyway, what we can do is, as Mr. Hettiarachchi said, that we have to convince political masters, and in many instances we are successful. There are unsuccessful stories as well, but the bureaucracy has that problem, to convincing the political masters of the more society-friendly approach. So that is, how we work. One more question. What is this one?
Perhaps I'll move over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will take a few. There was a very interesting question which I'll come to last. But on the issue of the size, number of ministries, again, I cannot speak for Sri Lanka. I don't know the circumstances, but I can draw some parallels from India. We have had coalition governments, especially at the state level, but also at the central level. One of the devices that has been devised is that we have ministries which have multiple ministers and one secretary. And that has actually helped in terms of keeping the policies a little bit better coordinated, because we have this institution of the ministers of state, some of whom have subjects which they handle, which are part of the secretary's responsibility. So you have one secretary with multiple ministers. I'm just putting that out as a fact. I'm not suggesting whether that's good or bad. On the question of politicization, again, I cannot speak for Sri Lanka, but in India, yes, I would agree that by and large, the higher civil services in India have been relatively free from politicization. A number of factors. One, the constitutional design, the approach of the Union Public Service Commission has been one institution among many. I mean, the Election Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Supreme Court are all. The central institutions have actually performed their safeguard roles quite well. We are also benefited from the sheer size and diversity of the country. So for much of my career, I'm attached to the Tamil Nadu cadre. So I work most of the time either in Tamil Nadu or in Delhi. For most of my career, the party in power in Chennai has been opposed to the party in power in Delhi, and I've had to work for both of them. So it is actually rational for the civil servant to remain apolitical when there is so much divergence between the different parties in different parts of the country. So civil servants themselves have internal incentives not to get politicized in that kind of environment. So I think diversity and size has helped. I would also draw this, a very important point was made by the Cabinet Secretary regarding political control, which is part of the way a democracy is supposed to function. We civil servants are unelected, the government is elected by the people, so we are supposed to be carrying out mandates of the political executive. So we draw a distinction between political control and political interference. Political control is legitimate, so it's for the government to decide which policies to follow. As a civil servant, there are many policies that I have felt are not in the country's interests, but I have had to carry them out because the government had the mandate. But political interference is where formally the decision is supposed to be taken by a civil servant under a set of rules and under a law, and those decisions he pretends to take himself while actually taking them at the instance of a minister. This is the difficult part, the bad part, and there it becomes a question of the independence that civil servants are able to exercise day to day in the performance of the job, the institutional arrangements, the safeguards, the courts, what happens if you don't obey those instructions, are there protections, and so on.
There's a cluster of questions that are coming in, which perhaps are connected to Mr. Hettiarachchi's thought that we should be trying to reinvent government rather than energize bureaucracy. Why do you think the ministries cannot attract young, dynamic entrepreneurs, thinking talent, if that's going to change the culture and ways of working in state service? Are there any plans to address this in the near future? Why is it that people are about to retire, heading government top jobs? To energize, we need a change there with young-minded and technology. What kind of steps are you taking to speed up government services? Proper training for government officials and so on. So these are about, to a certain extent, age and orientation, mindsets.
With reference to country, Sri Lanka's, the public service, we are modeled on, the services based, the delivery of services. There are varieties of services, like administrative service, medical services, planning services, accountant services, engineering services, so many services developed on the basis of what is called service minutes. Even for clerks, the management assistant, we have, the scheme of recruitment and so on and so forth. The entire bureaucracy, the public bureaucracy, including, those in the semi-government sector, those are based on, the various minutes of services. This is how the country is organized, bureaucracy is organized, the recruitments are. Therefore, there is only one route for a person to, the rise to the top of, the way structures are placed, you have to work in a particular segment of service for a particular number of years, and then you get promoted to next level, having gone through exams and all that, finally you come to, the top position, maybe you are this 55, 58, very closer to the retirement of 60 years. This is how it has been built. But this is not the country, what the country wants, I would like to broaden the question to, we have kept on telling for the last 40 years or so, the private sector has to run the economy. So the bureaucracy, the state bureaucracy has to, support this endeavor, for the benefit of, everybody in the country. But, the bureaucracy has, as you rightly identified, has, the run on the wheels of a very close economy, inward-looking kind of, the economic kind of bureaucracy. That we have not thought of, the remodeling it to suit the new requirement. Therefore, the able, young, those decision makers should come to the, the upper ranks of the bureaucracy fairly quickly, of course, with, the adequate level of training and experience and all that, but, not at the age of 55 or 60, but, maybe something like, the 40, 45 years, they should come to the top level. That machinery has to be developed, I don't see, that kind of, the thinking, the pervades through the, the bureaucracy, but, we are still entrenched in the, the bureaucracies developed in 1950s, 60s, and 70s to run the economy of the 21st century. This is a sort of a dilemma, that we come across, you require a certain level of performance, from the state sector. As I said, the kisi wadak karaganna bෑ. These are the, the words we come across, the hari durwalai. Service quality එක හරිම කිසි වැඩක් නැහැ. වෙලාවකට කිසි වැඩක් කරගන්න බෑ. You all work for a time frame, with certain objectives and targets, but the bureaucracies, the procedural driven and the rules driven won't match. Therefore, the dynamic bureaucracy in the public sector is also a must to run, the private sector efficiently. That part is, not properly addressed yet, the reinventing or rethinking of public services also must at this stage, at least, although we are, the second decades of, the 21st century, we are far behind, but still, we have to do this part, without which you cannot run at the pace that you want to or take this country forward. Thank you.
Dr. Somanathan would like to make a brief comment, and then I'm going to Mr. Hettiarachchi.
On the issue of people coming into public service, younger people and taking leadership positions, I think it's a very good idea in principle. What we have to ensure is that those who come in for their skills and not for their political contacts. And this is the dilemma that one faces when trying to induct people into an examination neutrally recruited bureaucracy. So recently the government of India has advertised for about 20 positions in key ministries where they have allowed any person above 40 with certain qualifications, domain expertise in certain fields to apply. And this is an experiment. They come in at what in the central government is called the joint secretary level, which would be equivalent of a secretary in a state government. And it's the first time it's been done. We have worked on this, and let's see how it works. But I'm just passing that on as a piece of information, that the attempt is to bring people into certain ministries with a 5-year contract, and they are scrutinized to ensure that they actually have some domain knowledge of that sector. They're allowed to come in for 5 years. They're paid the same scales as everybody else. So this is not, it's not that we're going to raise the scales to private sector levels, but there are many people who have applied. There are many people who are interested in coming into government because they've already probably made, their money in the private sector. They're well off. They now want to contribute. So there are people like that. There have been a lot of applications. The selection is underway.
Mr. Hettiarachchi.
මම හිතන්නේ අර ප්‍රශ්න ගොඩක් ඇතුළත වෙච්ච බොහෝ දේවල් වලට අධ්‍යාපනයේ වගකීම් යුතුයි කියලා මම විශ්වාස කරනවා. විශේෂව සාමාන්‍ය අධ්‍යාපනයේදී අර ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාව ගැන කතා කරලා තුන කවුරු හරි ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවේ දැවන්ත කඩාවැටීමක් තියෙනවා. නමුත් ඒක අපි කොහොම හරි ජය ගන්න ඕන කියලා මේවට විශාල වැඩසටහන් රාශියක් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා. අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා 2030 වෙනකොටවත් අපිට අපේ රට හොඳ තත්ත්වයකට ගේන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒ වගේම රාජ්‍ය සේවයේ බොහෝ අවස්ථාවල් තියෙනවා young entrepreneurship and ඇතුළට එන්න හැබැයි ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්නේ මේ කල්චර් එකේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙන මේ කල්චර් එක ඇතුළට නැත්නම් අර ડોક્ટર සමරතුංග වගේ මැනේජරල් සර්විස්ම තියෙනවා 10ක්. ඒක ඔය සමහර ඔයගොල්ලන්ට එක්ස්පෝස් වෙන්න නැතුව ඇති SLES ගත්තාම SLES කියලා තියෙන ડોක්ටර් සර්විස් ඉන්ජිනියර් සර්විස් ඒ හැම එකටම එන්නේ යං ග්‍රැජුවේට්ස්ලා ඒගොල්ලෝ මෙහි ඉගෙන ගත්තා පිටරට ඉගෙන ගත්තා ඊට අමතරව දැවැන්ත විදියට ඉඩකඩ තියෙනවා විදේශ පුහුණු වලට යන්න දේශීය පුහුණු වලට යන විශාල මත බජට් එකේ විශාල සල්ලි ප්‍රමාණයක් මානව සම්පත් සංගතයට වෙන් කරනවා. හැබැයි හැම දිනම ගිහිල්ලා නැවත එන්නේ මේ සංස්කෘතිය. මේ සංස්කෘති ගැප් එක තමයි ඔබේ අපේ අතර තියෙන වෙනස. මේක හදාගන්න එක ලේසි නෑ. ඒක තමයි කිව්වේ අර බියුරොක්‍රසි වෙනුවට දැන් අපි ගේන්න ඕනේ මොකද්ද විශේෂයෙන්ම තාක්ෂණය. තාක්ෂණෙත් එක්ක මේ තියෙන දේවල් හැමදේම කරන්න ඔබ දන්නවා. අධ්‍යාපනය ගත්තොත් මම හිතන්නේ තව වැඩි කල ඉස්කෝල තියෙන එකක් නෑ. ඉස්කෝල කියන එක අපේ මොබයිල් ෆෝන් එකේ නැත්නම් අපේ තියෙන ස්මාර්ට් ෆෝන් එක ඇතුලේ තියෙන්නේ. අපි කියනවා education anywhere anytime කියලා. මම ඒ වගේ ආසයි රාජ්‍ය සේවෙත් anywhere anytime එක. අපි 24/7 කියන එක මම හිතන්නේ ඉස්සරහට inevitable. ඒක එනවා ඉස්සරහට. ඉතින් ඒකෙන්ද එවැනි තත්ත්වයට යන්න මම හිතන්නේ මේ අපිට ඉක්මනින්ම තියෙන වෙනස තමයි බියුරොක්‍රසි එක එනර්ජයිස් කරන එක නෙමෙයි අපිට තියෙන්නේ. විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ තාක්ෂණය හැකියදා දුරට අපේ process improve කරන්න නැත්නම් මේ re-engineering the process කියන එකට ගෙන්න ඒ re-engineering කතරෙත් මම හිතන්නේ අවුරුදු දැන් 20ක් විතර තිස්සේ කතා කරන තාම අපිට තාම බැරි වෙලා තියෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ પાස්පෝර්ට් එක කරනාට පස්සේ අපේ තියෙන ඩෙන්ටිටි කාඩ් එකවත් හරියට ග්‍රාමීය මට්ටමේ ඉෂුව කරන මට්ටම තාක්ෂණය අරන් එන්න. මේකට තියෙන එකම උත්තරේ තමයි බියුරොක්‍රසි එක රකින්න නෙමෙයි තියෙන බය දන්නේ අද කතාවෙන් ඩිස්ට්‍රප්ෂන් කියන එක බියුරොක්‍රසි එක ඩිස්ටර්බ් කරන එක තමයි කරන්න තියෙන්නේ. වෙන මොකුත් කරන්න නැහැ. ඒකට තියෙන මොකුත් කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. කල යුත්තේ ඔබ දන්නා සියලු දෙනාම අපි ඉන්නේ පොත් ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රියල් රිවොලුෂන් එකේ ICT embedded public administration එකට ගියාට පස්සේ මේ රටේ විශේෂයෙන්ම ප්‍රයිවට් සෙක්ටර් එක මහජනයා සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම විදේශ ආයෝජකයෝ බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන අර සේවා ලාභීත්වය නැත්නම් සතුටෙන් සේව ලබා ගැනීමේ කාර්යය ඉෂ්ට ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. හැකිතාක් ඉක්මනින් තාක්ෂණයත් එක්ක මේක අරන් යන වගකීම තමයි අපිට තියෙන්නේ. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
Let me summarize that. He recognizes the importance of education, and in particular the issues that have been raised about English. There are ongoing programs to get English education up to a qualitatively different level by 2030. Within the government service, there is increasing emphasis being placed on foreign and domestic training. But what we really have to focus on is changing the culture, changing mindsets. There's a cultural gap. And he believes that in order to do this, we really must embrace technology. The time when government services, the expectations for government services to be available anywhere, anytime, 24/7 is upon us. If we do not respond to this, we will be in trouble. We have to recognize that we are in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution where ICT must be pervasive throughout public administration. I think his basic argument is that with technology being introduced, we will have a much better chance of getting over that cultural gap. Mr. Wijayawardhana, you have anything to add on this question of training, of cultural change, technology?
The manner it goes now, we will take a long time. If we really, the most of the criticisms we are getting, we are slow to communicate, we are slow to respond. It is time consuming and we are not equipped. This equipped part is not coming. That was one of the greatest challenge we have in this ministry, the kind of organizations we do. And this ease of doing business reform program is addressing partially in many organizations that introducing new single windows, that sort of services. So what Mr. Hettiarachchi said was fully endorsed. In the service delivery agencies should be the first targeted agencies. That is the kind of approach we take at this ministry.
I think that addresses some of the questions that were asked by you, which I didn't respond to. There are a lot of questions about investors requiring information, having to get information, approvals, decisions from government, and experiencing delays or opacity, difficulty of getting information from websites. And I think Ms. Wijayawardhana was kind enough to respond to that. I think in this round, obviously there are many more questions that have been asked. I'm grateful for all the questions. I hope I have tried to do justice by posing as many as were permitted by the time that we have. But I think we have looked at quite a lot of the constraints, and also I think you're beginning to see, even from Dr. Somanathan's comments, that it's not all negative, that there are some successes. Many people who come to Sri Lanka praise the electronic travel authorization scheme. Many people praise the ability to get a passport in one day. There are good sides to this story also. You must remember, no country has ever developed without the government sector, without the public administration pulling or driving or supporting that process. So it is in all our responsibility to try to work together, to try to reinvent government. I think that is the message from this panel. Not simply energizing the bureaucracy, which is a bunch of people who are kind of lazy, but reinventing government, reinventing the systems, putting the pressure, and the pressure has to come from all sides. And I think I will share these questions with the panel over lunch. I think your questions are also part of the pressure. From my side, all I have to say is that I believe that we have to understand these cultural differences. That is why I took the risky decision to try to run this in 2 languages. Some of the comments have expressed some displeasure around it, but that's life. That is how things work. I work in government, I work outside government. Things work more smoothly outside government, but in our system we have a lot of difficulties. But that is what our constitution says. That is what our laws say. That is what the voters expect. And to some extent, we have to work on this. Some of you have suggested that the answer is not running this mixed bag that I was doing, but that we should have sophisticated translation technology. I'm waiting for a day when I can put a chip in my head and understand Tamil. But that day hasn't come yet. So I'm doing the best I can. I apologize for the inconvenience caused to anybody. But I think the central lesson from Dr. Somanathan and from all of us is there's almost a cultural gap between the government sector and you. And you must understand us and we must understand you. And somebody like me who's going back and forth, as one of my bosses once said, Rohan, he's neither here nor there. So I'm the neither here nor there guy, or I'm both here and both there. I'm trying to be your translator. That is my role in life. So with that, I would ask Mr. Tyagaraja to wish Govindasamy to come and make some ceremonial things. But I have an announcement to make as well. I have two announcements. Okay. The Prime Minister is going to be here at 3 p.m. and therefore all participants are requested to remove their belongings when they go to lunch. Don't leave anything behind in this room because this has to be, the usual security sanitization kinds of things have to be done, and then you will be allowed to come in before 3 p.m. Security has requested for all who are parked outside our room to remove the vehicles when we break for lunch. I suppose these two things are all connected, right? So if you are parked right outside, you're requested to remove your vehicles. I believe those are the administrative announcements. Now, Mr. Govindasamy